Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 18th, 2026. Today, as always, I want to talk about the astrology and the I Ching for the day. And of course, I'll be looking at the 12 signs. I also want to look at the horoscope of Ali Larijani. So Ali Larijani is or was the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran. And I was looking at the news just before I was making this video, and Israel have claimed to have killed him. And apparently Ali Larijani he's an important figure. He may even be de facto ruler of Iran. And so if the Israelis have killed him, it might be a big deal. So I thought what I would do is look at his chart and just consider what might have been going on at the time of this raid, which may or may not have killed him. So anyway, so let's look at the chart for today. To begin with, I just want to look at the overall planetary picture, just to see what is happening. So don't forget, by the way, to like and subscribe if appropriate. I have to say that, don't I? So as far as today is concerned, we have this build up in Pisces. It's really getting strong, isn't it? I mean, we've now got 4 planets in Pisces. We've got the moon in Pisces. We've got the North Node in Pisces, and we've got the build up to the new moon. So this new moon, which I in my video, I'm not going to talk about the new moon in detail today. I'll do that for Thursday. Although, if you are in the Americas, I think the new moon is going to be this evening. Maybe not all of the Americas, but certainly Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time, whatever. The new moon is at 9:23 p.m. this evening. So it is a new moon time for us, even if the new moon isn't today, because, the moon and the sun are getting closer and closer together. And, you could say that the moon is combust. I mean, if you look at the moon's condition, you can in fact argue that it's besieged. I mean, if you look at the moon, it's got Mars on one side, it's got the sun on the other, so the moon is stuck between conjunction of Mars, conjunction of the sun, so there is a besiegement there. And so the moon could be sort of weakened by those two planets. I mean, in Vedic astrology, the sun is a malefic, Mars is a malefic, whichever way you look at it. So you could say that the moon is stuck between two malefics, and so it might be difficult for us, to fully express ourselves. On the other hand, the moon is it's in mutual reception to Jupiter. And earlier in the day, the moon makes a trine to Jupiter. So the moon, in fact, it makes a conjunction to Mars. Then it makes a trine to Jupiter. I mean, the moon is still sort of rather blotted out by the sun. And I think that what today we're feeling is, for many of us, it might just feel it's the end of something. Something is coming to an end. It's not just the lunar cycle is coming to an end. It's the season is coming to an end. We've got the equinox coming up. We've got Mercury about to go stationary direct. So that might be a lot of of how we feel at the moment. And at the same time, the sun is making a sextile to Uranus. Now, don't forget the Israeli horoscope. The Israeli horoscope has got what is it? It's got Mars at 28 degrees. 28 degrees Leo, isn't that right? I think Mars is at 28 degrees Leo. Let's just have a look at let's just have a look at the Israeli horoscope. This is just sort of by the way. I'm thinking. Let me just. So yeah, there's a chart of Israel. There's Mars at 28 degrees, 28 degrees 18 Leo. So the sun is making a quincunx to Israel's Mars. I mean, that's going to perhaps stir the Israelis up. They're going to feel they want to do stuff. because the quincunx may not be entirely easy. Sorry, that's a distraction. I'm going to talk about Larijani and his in a moment. We've got Sun sextile Uranus. So the thing about that sextile Uranus is that Uranus has just made an opposition to Israel's made a square to Israel's Sun. But anyway, I don't want to talk about the Middle East at this precise moment. So Sun sextile Uranus, for us as individuals, it's about being an individual. It's about perhaps doing things differently, but not in a way that is overly dramatic. We're not trying to cause upset, turmoil, demand attention. We can be original in a quiet and rather clever way. Another aspect we have is Venus square Jupiter. Now, Venus square Jupiter can be a problem aspect because Venus, Jupiter, they're both for benefics, but when you have too much positive energy, too much benefic energy, then we can take things too far. Venus square Jupiter can certainly be indulgent. Venus square Jupiter can enjoy the good things in life. It can enjoy the good things in life too much. So whatever we enjoy, we don't want to take it too far. Eating, drinking, exercise, giving to charity, if that's what turns us on, giving to charity. We could give too much. There could be too much generosity. Maybe some of us will feel generous today with Venus square Jupiter, but generosity has to be limited. Even if you can afford to be generous, doesn't necessarily mean you should be generous. Certainly not in an overt way. Because it just creates a wrong impression. And Venus square Jupiter, we could be talking about emotions being too gushing, being too emotional. So emotional might sound a bit fake. So with Venus square Jupiter, I do think that it's important that we don't take things too far. So that is the picture. If we set things for New York, if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is earlier in the sign. The moon, that trine between the moon and Jupiter, which I talked about, is very much part of the day. I mean, it's exact really in the middle of the day. So I think if you are in Australia and New Zealand or East Asia, then I think you can tune into the good luck and the sort of flowing nature of that trine between Moon and Jupiter. And maybe things really should work well, particularly as Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. Mars is still square Uranus. I talked about Mars square Uranus yesterday. Maybe this is connected with the supposed assassination of Ali Larijani. That Mars square, that heliocentric Mars square Uranus is starting to separate, so it's not as strong as it used to be. So that's probably the main thing to consider today. I don't know if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else hugely to report. I mean, Mercury is about to change sign. It's about to move into heliocentric. Mercury is about to move into Scorpio, where it would make a trine to Mars. So Mercury trine Mars. It's good for saying what's on our mind, but I don't think it's necessarily a particularly spectacular aspect. So that is the heliocentric picture. And now I want to consider the horoscope of Ali Larijani, who was born on the 3rd of June the 3rd, 1958. He was not born in Baghdad. I mean, I know I've set the chart for Baghdad. He was born I think he was actually born in Iraq, or modern-day Iraq. And I think it was 160 miles or kilometers from Baghdad. But the point is, because I don't have his time of birth, it doesn't really matter. I'm setting it for noon, so whether he was born in Baghdad or London or Tehran, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. So I'm setting the chart for Baghdad. I don't think it's not really it's not really a big deal where I set it because I don't have a time of birth. Now he is Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council in Iran, or maybe he is the former secretary, and he is or was one of the most powerful people in Iran. Some have said he's essentially the de facto leader. Now, the Israelis have claimed that they have assassinated him. I looked him on Wikipedia when I got up, and it gave his birth and death date. Now I looked again, and the death date has disappeared. So it's currently seen as being a rumor that he's dead, but the Israelis seem to be pretty sure that he is dead, as far as I can understand. Does it make a difference? I don't know. That they say about the Iranian leadership, but it's very layered. There's plenty of redundancy in the system. So if one person dies, you've always got someone else to take over. So just because Larijani has gone doesn't, if he has gone, it doesn't mean to say that Iran is going to collapse. But I think it's a good idea to look at his horoscope. Apparently, he's a philosopher. Was a philosopher. He's written books on Kant and the mathematics of Kant, and that was his thing. He's by all accounts is or was a clever man, and he has his sun in Gemini. So I have a sun in Gemini. That's always good to have a sun in Gemini, isn't it? I mean, a lot of variety. He enjoys variety. He enjoys perhaps intellectualizing, moving from one thing to another. Maybe Shia is maybe his religious faith has an intellectual dimension. I mean, that's always possible. You can if you're a Gemini, you can persuade yourself to believe in anything. I mean, if it's appropriate, you can always come up with arguments. I mean, that can certainly be how Gemini works. And he has Neptune. He has Venus conjunct the South Node, Venus in Taurus. Opposition Neptune. Venus opposition Neptune. Perhaps a difficult person to fathom. If you get close to him, can you really fathom? What kind of person he is. It's difficult to know, isn't it? I mean, Venus in Taurus seems very sort of solid and trustworthy. So there's a contradiction here between Sun and Gemini and Venus in Taurus. Very solid. Venus conjunct the South Node. Well, what can that be about? The wrong friends. That's one way of looking at it. Anyway, Venus is opposition Neptune, and I don't know if there's much else to report. Because what we're really interested in here is when he was killed, supposedly when he was killed. So the Israelis claim that he was killed in a raid taking place on the 16th, 17th of March. So I've set this chart for midnight Tehran time, when we had the supposed attack that killed the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. Now, I did mention a couple of days ago Moon square Uranus. I thought this Moon square Uranus was going to be an important aspect, and I mentioned that it was linked up with true Black Moon Lilith, and there was indeed a Moon square Uranus approximately at the time of this raid, which may have killed Ali Larijani. Now, we just looked at Israel's chart. Israel has its Mars at there's Israel's Mars 2818 Leo. So so that means that Uranus is really close now to making the square of Israel's Mars, and the Moon potentially was opposition Israel's Mars. And in general, when you think about moon square Uranus, you can think about an attack which has implications. So that's one aspect of this of this attack. So, what kind of transits did Larijani have at the time of this attack? Here is. Okay, hold on. Here is the. Here it is. So we've got Larijani's chart in the middle, and we've got the approximate time of the attack on the outer wheel. Now, we have 2 inner planet transits, which may be quite significant. So at the time of the attack, the Sun was at 26 degrees 13 Pisces. Now, Larijani has his Mars at 26 degrees 51 Pisces. So the Sun was within 1 degree of making a conjunction to his Mars. Additionally, Mars at the time of the attack was at 11-12 Pisces. So he had Mars making a square to his Sun. So he had Sun on his Mars, Mars square his Sun. So having those 2 inner planet transits at the same time could be quite deadly. I mean, that's how you look at transits. One transit on its own is not particularly interesting. But if you've got 2 inner planet transits coming together, that may be an important time, particularly if you are Ali Larijani and the Israelis are trying to kill you. I mean, that is not a good position to be in if the Israelis are trying to kill you and you've got Sun conjunct your Mars and you've got Mars square your Sun. I mean, that is a time to be very, very careful. So that's his chart, and certainly there I would have said that we have an indication of him dying. I'm not saying that is the answer, in itself. That's not going to tell us everything we need to know. Then we might also want to consider the horoscope of Iran. I mean, how serious was this? How serious was this chart? Was this for Iran? So here is the chart for the Islamic Republic, and the Islamic Republic has its Mars has got a Mercury-Mars conjunction at 20, Mars at 25, 26 Pisces, Mercury at 27 Pisces. So it's got a Mercury-Mars conjunction. In other words, the Mars of Iran is in the same place as the Mars of Larijani, and so here is the Sun hitting them. So the Sun hitting at that, I think, potentially would have been quite serious because it's hitting them both. And also look at Saturn. Iran has its Saturn at 8:18 Virgo, and the South Node the true South Node is on Iran's Saturn. In fact, Iran has kind of got a Saturn North Node conjunction, when it came into being on April the 1st, 1979, and so with the South Node on Saturn, that indicates that things aren't necessarily well, not really. And look, transiting Mercury was opposition. Don't forget, Mercury is on the North Node. That Mercury North Node conjunction was opposition Iran's Saturn. So we do have an indication there that something rather difficult has just happened to the Islamic Republic. Then I suppose we should just quickly look at Israel's chart. I will be looking at Israel's chart again very soon because in light of the equinox. So here's Israel's chart, and we put Larijani's death on the outer wheel for that attack. So what's going on with Israel? Just a reminder that Uranus is currently at 28 degrees 10 Taurus. Israel's Mars is at 28 degrees 18 Leo. So Uranus is almost exactly making the square to to Israel's Mars, and it's going to get closer and closer, and it's exact at the time of the equinox. So that is a real point of power. Anyway, those are a few thoughts on the supposed death of Ali Larijani. It has not been confirmed, but the Israelis are claiming it. And now I want to look at the astrology for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, March the 18th, 2026. Aries. Today, Wednesday, may not be so different from yesterday. The moon is still in Pisces. It hasn't gone into Aries yet, because tomorrow the moon will be in Aries, so that will be a change. And of course, we've got the build up to the new moon. In fact, if you're in the Americas, the new moon is going to be this evening, and so that really is a harbinger of change. But as far as today is concerned, you probably feel sort of quite unique, quite different. You have your own way of doing things, and I'm not convinced that you're going to be particularly sociable. I think that you will enjoy your own company in your own quiet way, and maybe you can benefit from a trine aspect between the moon in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. The moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. They're in each other's signs, and this trine, as far as you're concerned, Aries, is quite laid back. If you can just relax, avoid complications, then things should really be very easy. So there's no need to stress, really. There's no need to stress. I mean, you might want to stress anyway. There is something about Aries that is pretty unique. You can be unique if you have the opportunity, but perhaps you're just going to be unique in your own way, in your own space. But no one may notice you being unique. I mean, that's often the way it should be. But if anyone does try to interact with you, and you get to discuss things, you get to talk, you get to tell someone what you really believe, and you talk about your plans for the future, you might actually come over as being quite unusual, even a little bit disturbing, if you're completely honest. But maybe you don't want to be honest, and in many respects, Aries, it is a time for keeping things back, just waiting, and when I say you don't want to be honest, when I mean honest, I don't mean honest as in dishonest. They're just things you don't necessarily always want to talk about. So I think that today can be what you make of it, and it can be as straightforward as you like. And if you want to avoid things that are complicated, then I think that you certainly can. And you'll have your chance to really make things happen. The Aries season, is nearly there. I mean, we've got when is it? I think it's the 20th. We've just got a day or two before the sun moves into Aries. Now, as far as other people are concerned, you can certainly have an impact on other people, no doubt about that. And I think that with Venus moving through your sign, some people think you're great. They think you've really got something to offer. They want to be part of the action. What is the action you are able to create? And that's all well and good, but it can just be, too much of a good thing. We do have a square aspect between Venus and Jupiter. That Venus-Jupiter square is a bit indulgent. It can be a bit gushing, and some people might be behaving in a way that, as far as you're concerned, isn't entirely appropriate. It just might seem over the top. It might be too emotional, or it might just, disturb your peace of mind. So Aries, that is another good reason why, today, you might want to keep a low profile, just wait for the new moon, wait for Mercury to go direct, wait for the sun to move into Aries, because it is all happening over the next couple of days. But just because it's all happening doesn't mean you want to directly be a part of it. There is a good argument for watching it all at a distance. Taurus, Venus is making a square to Jupiter. That is, I think, quite an important aspect from a Taurian perspective. After all, Venus is your ruling planet. So Venus square Jupiter, it might sound good, Venus square Jupiter, because Jupiter is in a great position. Jupiter is a benefic. It's the planet of good luck. So you could argue that really, any aspect from Jupiter should be welcome. But when you've got two benefics in aspect to one another, it can just get a little bit exaggerated. You might exaggerate things. You start doing something and you just keep going, and you perhaps get over emotional, or you could be over generous. You could overindulge. There's a lot of over with a Venus square Jupiter, wanting to exaggerate, and even taking things too seriously. You just want more. So it kind of expands what it touches. So I don't want to, tell you to be, puritanical today. I mean, you're a Taurus. The average Taurus, enjoys the good things in life. In fact, if you've got a Taurus who doesn't enjoy the good things in life, who is quite abstemious, then that person can be quite difficult, or can be quite dangerous. You think of sort of Hitler and Robespierre, or I think Ayatollah Khomeini. He was a Taurus, wasn't he? So, do enjoy the good things in life to some extent, but you don't want to take things too far. It really is possible to go too far with Venus square Jupiter, and anything can be taken too far. A conversation can be taken too far. You talk to someone and you keep talking, and things move from one thing to another, and you've got yourself into potentially a difficult situation. So, everything in moderation, I think. Most things in moderation. I mean, there are some things, of course, you should not do in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, you know what I mean. And, there is nonetheless a sensible side to you. I think that, at the moment, you have, or can have, a good sense of your own authority. So, authority means, having authority over other people in certain situations. Maybe they are limited situations, but it seems that you do have areas of expertise. And it goes beyond expertise. It does go to authority. So even if you don't have the expertise, you appear to have the authority. So, well, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, if you're in a situation where everyone is taking you seriously, whatever you do, whatever you say, well, that could be undesirable. So again, it's another situation where you have to know your own limits. Just because people are listening to you doesn't mean that you're always making sense. But if you bear in mind what your area of expertise is, you stick to that area of expertise, then really things should be fine, and you will be respected. And overall, your ability to talk, to spin a yarn, if that's what you feel like doing, is going to be extremely good, and people are going to like you. And I think that you can demonstrate a fundamental optimism, a view of the future, a view of what is possible in the future that a lot of people are going to really appreciate. Gemini. It is a time, Gemini, when things should be moving. They really should. There is a sense of action, things happening, and also that it's your responsibility to make things happen. And this is because many Geminis are quite ambitious. Sometimes Geminis deny that they're ambitious, or they think about something else, and they don't appear to be ambitious, but they are. I think that every Gemini is considering what is possible. Part of a problem about Geminis and their ambitions is they can perhaps have too many ambitions in too many different directions, and as a result, nothing gets done. But we do have a concentrated position in Pisces, 4 planets in Pisces plus a node. So while it's there, do use it, because tomorrow the moon will move out of Pisces or move into Aries. So there is this concentrated position which does allow you to tune into your ambitions, and don't forget that the new moon is nigh. In fact, if you're in the Americas, the new moon is this evening. I think it's at 9:23 p.m. Sorry, when I say this evening, sorry, let me rephrase that. It's on Tuesday. It's Tuesday evening in the Americas. I think it's at 9:23 p.m. Tuesday Eastern time. But if you're not in the Americas, the new moon is not until tomorrow, which is Thursday. So do make the most of this, and it's important to plan. Think about how things are developing, where you would like things to develop, and don't allow yourself to be put off by temporary setbacks. Mercury is retrograde. Okay, Mercury is not going to be retrograde for much longer. I think it's on the 20th. I think 2 days time. Mercury goes direct, but still, right now things could be slow, particularly if you're looking for dramatic action. So if you're that kind of person, if you feel that something absolutely needs to happen, you want to translate thoughts into action, then you could be disappointed. It's going to be really difficult. If you want something done right now, you're in a hurry. Yeah, it could be hard work. It could be frustratingly hard work. And so it's important not to be impatient. Impatient Geminis, there's nothing worse than impatient Geminis. They go round and round in circles, and they can actually cause offense, because they're just thinking about their mind, what they want, and they're not really thinking about other people. And do think about other people. Other people are a bit slower than you'd like them to be. Maybe they're kind of rooted in the past, certainly no further from the present. They're not really addressing themselves to the future. So you've got to accept other people's limitations, and if things do take a long time to unfold, then that's just the way it goes. But I would go back to the fact that today should be positive. The moon is making a trine to Jupiter. The moon in Pisces, trine to Jupiter. That aspect really does allow you to build. You can build things up in a way that might be slow, but if you have reasonable ambitions, then things should be easy as well, one step at a time. And if you want to think about money or something of a financial nature, then perhaps there's something of a financial nature that you'd like to be sorted out. Now, it can be sorted out. It might not be sorted out in its completion, but it might slowly go through those steps, and you see the first signs that things are moving your way. if you want some money, if you've been thinking about a sum of money, or you want more money, whatever it is, you get there. You are getting there, but you don't expect some sort of overnight success. Especially as we've got the build up to the new moon. Things are slowing down for everyone, and I think that you just need to accept that. Cancer. It's a day when I think that you are, pretty familiar with everything that's happening. I don't think anything's going to happen today that you weren't expecting. Particularly if you're just an ordinary Cancerian, you're not involved in a war or a battle zone. You're just leading your own private life. In that case, I don't think there's going to be much that will surprise you. Probably anything. I don't think anything will be surprising you, because you just know. Even if something happens, which no one was expecting, at an emotional level, you can see it happening. You can feel it happening. So you have this emotional sensitivity today, which I think is going to be very useful. And furthermore, I think you have a fair amount of luck. I mean, if we could categorize the 12 signs today by how much luck they have, I think you might argue that Cancer right now, all things being equal, is the luckiest of the 12. I mean, after all, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. Okay, that's the advantage of having Jupiter in your sign. And when Jupiter is in your sign, there are a couple of places where the moon is in mutual reception with Jupiter. When the moon is in Pisces, the moon is in mutual reception with Jupiter. When the moon is in Sagittarius, it is. So 1/6 of the time at the moment, the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. So that's great, isn't it? So it is a lucky time for Cancerians. It's not just that today is lucky. I think overall you are luckier than average. So I'm hoping that you're able to make the most of that. And with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, a lot of things are making sense. You might have ideas about the future. You might have new perspectives, which maybe not so long ago they seemed to be pure fantasy, but now it is starting to come together, and so that is really something really to build on. Another reason for things to really work for you. Additionally, we have a square between Venus and Jupiter. Now, this Venus-Jupiter square, the picture with the Venus-Jupiter square is rather mixed. So Venus and Jupiter, you could say that you've got two benefics are making an aspect to one another. On the other hand, you could say also that Venus square Jupiter is rather indulgent. Things just get exaggerated, and that is possible. But Jupiter is in your own sign. Venus is in Aries. It's a very cardinal influence, and so there is certainly a possibility with Venus square Jupiter that you are lazy, that you don't push yourself, that you take things for granted. That is the nature of Venus square Jupiter. But the fact that it's a square means that there is a certain amount of dynamism there. And so what could happen with this Venus square Jupiter is that you understand that if you want to be lucky, you have to work on it. And if you do push yourself today, you don't have to push yourself. I really don't think you do. I think if you want to just do nothing, you can. But I think that would be unfortunate. So with this Venus square Jupiter, you're able to project yourself very well. You can leave people in no doubt about who you are, what you want, what kind of person you are, and you can come over, I think, as a fairly sort of attractive and charismatic person, and people will focus on you. They'll listen to what you say, And you might think there's no point, people aren't listening. They are listening. If you make suggestions, then I think these suggestions will be taken very seriously, because because you know how to carry yourself today. I mean, fundamentally, and so I think it's important that you really make the most of things. Okay, I know other people might sometimes find it difficult. It is a problem time in many respects, because we've got new moon, Mercury going stationary direct, and the equinox coming together in such a short period of time. Can cause chaos, but you, Cancer, you do understand it all. You are perhaps, Cancer, at the center of the wheel, the place where things are not moving, and because of that, this is a time where you can really make the most of your luck. So perhaps the message today is don't waste it. Leo. Right now, Leo, the sun is at 28 degrees Pisces, so it's really getting ready to move into Aries, and you can feel that you're almost like you're neither one place nor the other, but you're still on the Pisces side, and so don't feel that you have to push things too far. Also, the sun is starting to make a conjunction to Skeet, not Scat, Skeet. We talked about Scat yesterday. So Scat is this fixed star at the beginning of Pisces. Skeet is a fixed star at the end of Pisces. Skeet is a much more important fixed star. And as I like to say, Skeet is a star often associated with accidents, disasters, things going wrong, and with the sun conjunct Skeet, you're aware of what can go wrong, and maybe the fear of accidents and disasters is a real issue rather than the actual problems themselves. Instinctively that things can change quickly, and if you bear that in mind, then you can perhaps be cautious. It's not a time, I don't think, for really pushing yourself. It's a time of preparation. It's not just because the sun is getting ready to move into Aries. It's also Mercury is stationary direct. It's build up to a new moon. Yeah, the new moon is very close, but it's not quite here yet. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then this evening there is a new moon, Eastern time. I think it's sort of 9:23 p.m. But things are a bit fragile and delicate, and you might find that you've got too much energy. So there might be a lot of energy here, which you can't necessarily do anything with. Sorry about the phone, I can't do anything about it, I just let it ring. So you've got a lot of energy, and the question is, how do you assert this energy? Maybe you shouldn't assert this energy in any direct and overt way. Perhaps you need to keep this energy to yourself, or better still, to focus it in the right direction, and focus it on something that is constructive. Not get caught up in big ventures, things you feel you want to do right now. There is that temptation. So if you feel this energy building up, then what are you going to do with it? Then probably you should find a way of harnessing it. But some Leos might go piling in, and in the end find that they've bitten off too much. So take it easily. I mean, the time for action is nearly there, but you're not quite there yet, and so there's still plenty of time for thinking, feeling, working out what you're going to do next. There isn't as much hurry as you think there is, and it's not like you're talking about missed moments. You might think you're going to miss your chance, but I think there's always going to be another chance, and I think that in a few days' time, things are going to be a lot easier. But still, if there is something you want to do, then you can do it. But you just got to be careful about it. You've got to not feel that you need to do everything at once. Though, still, Leo, there is something rather unique about you right now. I mean, you have the sun is sextile Uranus. And this Sun sextile Uranus, is about you doing something original, but it's a sextile. It's not about breaking things down, causing a big fuss, demanding attention. Instead, it's about quietly demonstrating your originality, and you might well be able to do this in a work setting. Perhaps you've been developing something for years. You've been fine-tuning your own uniqueness, what it is that makes you special. And this Sun sextile Uranus just gives you an opportunity to demonstrate it in a way that is, very natural and spontaneous, and you don't have to push it. You don't have to demand everyone's attention. And, you might even think when no one's watching, but they are watching. And if you just do what comes naturally, and you're not too self-conscious, and you're not afraid of your own originality, then I think that Sun sextile Uranus could be quite a useful influence. Virgo. Virgo, it is a time of change, and this change could well be, impacting you. I mean, in fact, we've got, if you think about the three changes that are about to unfold, they all affect you in a way, because, we've got Mercury about to go stationary direct, and of course, Mercury is your ruler. We have got a new moon coming up, this evening, in fact, if you're in the Americas, or tomorrow if you're elsewhere. And that new moon is in Virgo, your opposite sign. Plus, it's the equinox, when the sun moves out of Pisces, when the sun moves out of your opposite sign. So these three things are likely to create change, and I think it could be a fortunate change. It's particularly good that Mercury is going stationary direct. Mercury hasn't always been great going direct, but it's now Mercury's now moving very slowly. It's additionally in it's conjunct the North Node. So with Mercury conjunct the North Node, Mercury was conjunct the North Node yesterday. I mean, because Mercury is now going very slowly. North Node always goes pretty slowly. So with Mercury conjunct the North Node, it's quite easy to know how to behave, particularly when you're with other people. It's just straightforward. Sometimes it can be difficult to work out, what you should do, what you should say, but it is all very straightforward. I mean, if you follow that path represented by the node, and you do what feels right, then you're not going to make any faux pas. Additionally, we have a trine between Moon and Jupiter. The Moon is in Pisces, your opposite sign. Jupiter is ruler of Pisces. So Moon trine Jupiter, it really does give you, the ability to really relate to people. In an easygoing way, and it doesn't matter who the people are. They could be acquaintances. They could be your spouse, whoever it is. You do have that capacity to relate at many different levels. Now, what I don't think you should try to do, Virgo, is try too hard to make things happen off your own bat. to take the initiative. If you are tempted to take the initiative, to decide that this is what you are going to do, you want to do something definite. If you are tempted to do that, then I don't think things are going to work. You might end the day feeling really very frustrated. It's like you're dealing with dense matter. The matter down here, the material world, is dense. It doesn't really want to move. People are prepared to talk, but are they prepared to move? Are they prepared to take initiatives? Are they prepared to respond to your initiatives? Are you able to make real changes to the material world today? I think the answer is no. And it's a temporary situation, and it's exacerbated by the fact that there are no planets in Earth signs. I mean, it's not just because there are no planets in Earth signs. It's other factors that need to be considered. So, if you're planning on making concrete changes today, I would say forget it. It's more about influence. It's about how people respond to you, people listening, you listening, and that, I think, is the way to handle today. Libra, Venus square Jupiter. That is the main aspect of the day. Venus square Jupiter, and Venus square Jupiter will affect you. I mean, it has to affect you, doesn't it? I mean, Venus is your ruler, and it's square Jupiter. Now, is this aspect good or bad? It kind of depends. It depends how you look at it. It depends what you're doing. Now, if we look at Venus square Jupiter in the worst possible light, then it's a square. You've got two planets clashing with one another, and when you've got the two benefics, Venus and Jupiter, aspecting one another, you can get indulgence. It can be quite a lazy aspect. Now, that's particularly bad if you've got Venus trine Jupiter. Like me, I've got Venus trine Jupiter. I do have a lazy streak. Might not seem like it at the moment, but I do. I can just drift off forever with Venus trine Jupiter, particularly as I've got Venus trine Jupiter and Neptune. I've got a grand trine involving Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune. That can be treacherous. That's probably why I got sort of tangled up in astrology. So, Venus square Jupiter, maybe not such a problem as Venus trine Jupiter, but at least there's some dynamism with Venus square Jupiter. But still, it can be lazy. It can be overindulgent, and it doesn't always know when to stop. So, think about, all the things you're doing in your life, and ask yourself how you could take them too far. That could be over-exercising, over-eating, over-drinking, over-talking, being over-generous. All of these kind of things are possible with Venus square Jupiter, and because Venus is in Aries, your opposite sign, there's just some danger, but you kind of get carried along with things. You just go with it, and that's what you do, and that might not be such a good thing. I think you have to be careful there. So with Venus square Jupiter, it's an aspect that does have another side to it. It may be with Venus square Jupiter, if you handle things correctly, that you could actually benefit considerably from other people. Venus is in Aries, it's in your opposite sign. Venus is in mutual reception to the Sun, so Venus is not badly placed, even though it is in its detriment, and that square to Jupiter might be the impetus to do something that relates to your hopes or your ambitions, and Venus square Jupiter can give you that push, and that push can come from other people getting encouragement, even getting support. So that is possible, and maybe you just have to be a little bit discerning. Some people really can help you. They can give you the impetus you need to move forward, but other people maybe they just encourage you to be lazy, they just encourage you to exaggerate, they encourage you to overindulge. And overindulgence today, Libra, is the absolute last thing that you want to be doing. Scorpio. Scorpio today, Wednesday, is pretty much like yesterday. There's not a huge difference between today and yesterday. Like yesterday, like Tuesday, we have a lot of planets in water signs. We've got Jupiter in Cancer, got 4 planets in Pisces, plus the North Node in Pisces, and that water influence, does have an impact on you. Scorpio completes the grand trine, so I think that things really can move. I mean, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, especially at the beginning of the day. I mean, Mars is actually starting to make a trine to Jupiter. Maybe you're starting to feel that. I mean, Mars trine Jupiter can be about fortunate action. It can also just be about feeling positive. And so with Mars trine Jupiter, you're now perhaps aware that something is making sense, and even that something is protecting you, something is looking after you. That Jupiter in Cancer, and it's easy to have doubts, to believe that nothing is happening, that everything is difficult and grim. But Jupiter is saying, no, that's not the case. There is a way through. Things are going to get better. And over the next few days, as Mars trines Jupiter, you're going to feel that things are happening, things are moving. But maybe, things really are getting better. And in general, it is a time to be thinking about yourself, like yesterday, to be thinking about what yourself, what you can do, what makes you special, and how you can be different. Clearly you are different. You have a different view, and your view may not be to everyone's liking, and that's not really your problem. But people need a different view, and I think that you may have a chance to be noticed, to have an influence, and to be listened to. But if no one listens to you, it doesn't really matter. If need be, you can be very independent and self-reliant. I don't think you need anyone's support. You don't need anyone's praise. And so I do think that things are looking good. I don't think they have to be spectacular, but the sun is sextile Uranus. All of us can be influenced by that sun sextile Uranus, but as far as you're concerned, that sun sextile Uranus creates a possibility of a surprise that might relate to your ambitions. Maybe you thought something couldn't be done, wasn't possible, and maybe all of a sudden you see evidence that something can be done. It just happened suddenly. You what you thought was hopeless was really going nowhere. You just see evidence that it's really coming together, maybe because of what someone says or what someone offers. So do look out for that, and don't entirely neglect other people, the right people. I mean, some people can really be useful. They can spring useful surprises. Other people may be somewhat lazy and distracted. They might want to just enjoy themselves, but in a mindless way. I mean, you want to enjoy yourself today, but you want to enjoy yourself in a way that is very intense, is very personal, is very particular to you. Other people might want to enjoy themselves in a way that is decadent, it's going nowhere, it's totally insincere. And insincerity is not something that the average Scorpio appreciates, and you might find that some people are insincere, They are just wasting their time moving from one thing to another. They don't have any certainty or reliability, and for a Scorpio, you can find that rather annoying. Sagittarius, keep going. Sagittarius, you've made a few decisions, and you want to keep on with these decisions. You don't allow yourself to be sidetracked. Don't feel that you have to act too early. I think that is, especially important, with all these planets in Pisces. You are running according to your own clock. You're not running to anyone else's clock. If you run according to other people's clock, you might think, oh, something has to be done. You've got to make a move. It's now or never. But that's not the right approach. I know that Sagittarius is quite a fiery sign, quite an action-orientated sign, but there's a time for everything. And right now, you still need that time to just be yourself, to just relax, maybe just enjoy your own company. And it's all connected perhaps with the build-up to the new moon. The moon is waning. This is the absolute end of the lunar cycle. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then this evening we've got the new moon. I think it's at 9:23 this evening if you're Eastern Standard Time. But it is a delicate time with this new moon, particularly as this new moon is really at the end of the sign. And so, however much you think something should be done, I think that you should hold back, and at the same time recognize that good behavior is important. I think good behavior does matter to you. I know that Sagittarius has a reputation for being wild and crazy and anything goes, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. As I often say with Sagittarius, it's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is a very moralistic sign. It can be. And it's absolutely possible, Sagittarius, that at the moment you have particular standards about what behavior is acceptable. And, okay, there could be an element of hypocrisy there. Most of the time you can handle any kinds of behavior, including any kind of behavior from yourself, but now you're more particular. You are more demanding. You do have high standards about how people should behave and how they should not behave. And you don't have to be authoritarian about it. You don't have to get offended. Instead, maybe you can just communicate your displeasure in a way that is quite subtle. Maybe a look is one look, one glance is all it takes. But it's possible, Sagittarius. You don't really need anyone. Venus is making a square to Jupiter, and so with Venus square Jupiter, one could say that other people are irritating. That is one way of looking at it. You are Jupiter. Venus is making a square. Venus is a social planet, represents other people. Some people's behavior is irritating. Yeah, some people are not maybe taking things as seriously as they should, and that could annoy you. And I do think, Sagittarius, something quite traditional, even conservative, is, when I say conservative, I'm not meaning it in a political sense, conservative with a small c, as we say in the UK. So things should be done properly. And yeah, the traditional side to you at the moment is quite strong. It's not going to last forever. I think that as these planets move out of Pisces into Aries, things will calm down. I think you're going to be more relaxed and easygoing. But right now, you like things to be done in a particular way. Capricorn. So we've got a load of planets in Pisces, and with all these planets in Pisces, that indicates to me that things are flowing. You are perhaps quite sort of emotionally aware, and additionally, Capricorn, I think that you're quite good at communicating. You can tell people what's on your mind without causing offense. Whatever needs to be said, Capricorn, you can say it. The words come out, very easily, very smoothly. Although you still understand what is important. Some things are important. Some things can't be compromised. But I don't think that there are going to be any serious social difficulties today. In fact, right now, I think that your social skills are pretty good. I think you can present yourself in a way that is attractive, that people like, and I think that you're good at feeling out the common ground between yourself and another person. So if you're looking for some kind of unifying influence, that is an influence that you very much can provide. Now, as far as what the main aspect is today is, well, it's a square between Venus and Jupiter. I mean, this Venus-Jupiter square is likely to have some impact on you. I mean, you do fundamentally have your own way of doing things, and I think that it's particularly strong at the moment, and it may actually be a feature of the next couple of years. Don't forget that Saturn, your ruler, has just gone into Aries. It's going to stay in Aries until 2028, and so with Saturn in Aries, you have your own way of doing things. You're quite firm about that. And now with Venus square Jupiter, you still have your own approach. You work in a particular way. It's quite individualistic. And then there's outside pressure. There's pressure to do things differently and to perhaps be more accommodating of other people. You can be very accommodating, as I've just said, certainly in terms of what you say, how you communicate. But what about in terms of action? What if you're being asked to do something that you don't necessarily want to do? And that might be the problem with Venus square Jupiter. Jupiter can represent outside pressure. And you have to think about what that outside pressure is all about. Jupiter is a planet which is dignified right now. It's exalted, and it's in your opposite sign. And it's just possible that you don't listen to someone enough. Maybe someone is asking you to do something you don't want to do, or is making a suggestion that you don't feel happy about, and you might potentially respond badly. But instead, you need to know what's going on. You always need to know what the other person is saying, especially if that other person has some kind of authority. They might be related to your work, but it could be anyone who you have to respect at some level. So if they're telling you something or they're suggesting something, you don't have to respond immediately, and there's certainly scope for negotiation. But I mean, I do think that listening to authority figures today could be quite important. Aquarius. The Pisces emphasis continues. At a time when I don't think that Saturn is doing a huge amount at the moment. Of course, Saturn is your ruler, and so we pay a lot of attention to Saturn if we're doing the Aquarian chart. But Saturn is is kind of a bit out of it at the moment, and maybe that's a good thing. With all this stuff in Pisces, it just could be that you're not particularly bothered. I mean, I know when I do these 12 signs, there's always pressure to come up with something. I have to say something about today, but I don't think today is so dissimilar from yesterday. I mean, yesterday we had 4 planets in Pisces. Today we got 4 planets in Pisces. And so it could be a continuation. And if you remember what I was talking about yesterday, I was talking about money. I think I spent the whole time talking about money for Aquarians. And so I could talk about money for the next couple of minutes, but I don't really want to repeat myself, except to say that I think that money is or remains an important issue. It's something you do need to keep thinking about. It's something that matters, and if there's something bothering you of a financial nature, it's not going to go away, and so it might be best to just respond to it and do what you need to do. So, money aside, I think that generally speaking, you're able to express yourself very well. I think that relationships look reasonably promising. I think that you know how to get on with people, and I think they know how to get on with you. And so if you're trying to create a feeling of unity, I'm not saying you're going to get complete unity, but there is a unifying force at work which you can foster. So if you want to get closer to people, be part of something larger than yourself. I mean, I know that's not a very Aquarian thing, but if that's what you want, then I think you can start to make it happen, in a gentle way. We shouldn't really expect huge amounts to be happening, though, because it's the end in so many respects, isn't it? We've got a new moon coming up. The moon is waning. Mercury is coming to a standstill. We've got the equinox coming up. So it's that moment where things are starting to come to a standstill, and it is an important pivot that all of us, regardless of our sign, are experiencing, and sort of in preparation for this pivot. Aquarius, maybe right now there isn't really a great deal that you need to do, and maybe one can just leave it at that. Pisces. So we've got new moon coming up in the Americas. I think the new moon is this evening. I think it's at 9. I think it's at 9:23 this evening Eastern time if you're in New York. So it would be even earlier in the evening if you're in California or Chicago or British Columbia. So this new moon, it's important for you. This new moon is in your sign. I'll be talking more about this new moon tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow, Thursday, that's when I'll be really paying attention to the new moon. But I just have to point out that it is very close, and with this new moon in your sign, things are just perhaps coming together. Things are culminating. The Pisces season. This is the peak of the Pisces season. We've now got these 4 planets plus the North Node in Pisces. New moon in Pisces. This is as good as it gets. And tomorrow the moon will be out of Pisces. So it's a time, Pisces, when you can, I hope, be very focused on the things that are important to you. And it's important also that you don't waste your energy, that you don't dissipate it. Because one aspect we have today is a square between Venus and Jupiter. Now this Venus-Jupiter square, I'm inclined to think it's more of a negative than a positive, to be honest. Venus square Jupiter, you've got 2 benefics making a hard aspect to each other. So there just could be a degree of laziness, indulgence. You just want to stay in one place, indulging yourself, the good things in life. Once you start doing something, you might just want to continue with it, whatever it might be. And it might not be helped by someone else. Venus square Jupiter, Venus might represent someone who is a bad influence. It could just represent temptation. I mean, Venus square Jupiter, we could interpret this as over expenditure. You might spend too much money. So if you are thinking about money and you're thinking about buying something, I would think again. It's not a time for buying things you don't need. You might spend money because it feels easy, but you do it, and then after you've done it, you realize that it really wasn't the right thing to do, and there could be a lot of regret with that Venus square Jupiter. So do think about that. That Venus square Jupiter just could encourage you to take something too far, and if something is working for you, if it's something that is genuinely a part of who you are, it doesn't need expenditure. So spending money is not going to make your life better. Well, unless you're spending money on essentials. But if there's something extra that you looks nice, you don't necessarily need it, but you feel you'd like it anyway. But I wouldn't. So spending money on non-essentials, it just could be a cause for regret. And indulgence in general, taking things too far, especially if you're being encouraged by other people, is something that should be avoided. And but I don't want to take away from what really could be a very good day. I mean, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. That's what the day starts off with. And the moon, Jupiter, they're in mutual reception of one another. The moon is moving through your sign, so you can feel good about yourself, and you can feel good about your prospects without needing props, particularly props that you have to pay for. So that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 31, which is influence. It's about how we try to have an impact on other people. We would like to be influential. We would like to be listened to. We would perhaps like to be an opinion former, an influencer. Influencers. We're hearing a lot about influencers recently because they're all leaving Dubai. That's not how it works. All these successful influencers, they go to Dubai. I don't know if I'd ever be able to go to Dubai. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that astrology is a crime in Dubai. Maybe wrong on that. But if I was a successful astrological influencer, which of course I'm not, but if I was and I went to Dubai, I might get arrested. I think that really is possible, simply because I'm an astrologer and I'm a sorcerer. Of course, I'm not a sorcerer, but anyway. Influence. Everyone's trying to have an influence. They're perhaps trying to have an influence on YouTube, and we all would like to have an influence. We might say that we don't care, but we do care. It gives me a kick, does it? I put out these videos, and people listen to me. People, maybe they're influenced by me. I mean, that's a big responsibility. I mean, no one should take me too seriously. I'm a very imperfect human being. But anyway, me included, we all like to have an influence. But the question is, how successful are we? And the problem here is that the top line moves. And the top line, it's about influence, but it's also how we're trying to influence. And influence, it's talking about the jaw and the tongue. In other words, it's talking about words. We try to influence through words, and we talk a lot, and we hope that by talking a lot, people listen. We are influencing them. The reality is it's just hot air. That's the thing. You can talk a lot today, but I don't think anyone is seriously going to be listening. And that, of course, applies to me particularly, probably. So maybe you're not listening to this. It's just words. So in terms of influence, don't think that you can have much influence. However much you say, it's just absolutely possible that people aren't listening. And at some stage, you might recognize that because top line moves. We move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 33, which is retreat. So today might be trying our hardest to have an influence. We want people to listen to us, and at some stage we may realize it's just not working. And so we back off, and tomorrow is another day. So that's it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.